Hi people. So this is one of those videos I've probably touched on before, excuse me, but I think it's always relevant. And I think the dynamic of this has somewhat been impacted by social media. Well, not somewhat, very much so. I'm talking about the cult of celebrity. Now, throughout the 20th century, probably beginning with Rudolph Valentino in about the 1920s onwards, there's always been a sort of adulation of celebrity on some level. There would have been equivalents before that, but really it's in the 20th century that we saw this phenomenon in any very significant way. And throughout the 20th century, we had the rise of television, and then later on, the internet, and in this century, social media as well, and of course, the news media throughout that. I sometimes wonder the celebrities of the past, the big names of the past, someone like Elvis Presley or Marilyn Monroe, or Muhammad Ali for that matter, John Lennon, those big names. Um, how would they have coped as celebrities today? Would they be as adulated, or would they maybe find that they'd be dealing with even more controversies than they faced in their lifetimes? Elvis, for example, would probably find a lot of unsavory social media posts, conspiracy theories, and so on about his health or about appearances at concerts. Um, John Lennon, some of his outbursts probably would have got unsavory social media attention. Now, I'm not saying these people wouldn't have been admired and they wouldn't have had their fans still, but I do believe that it changes. The Kennedys is another example to go into the political domain. John F. Kennedy was in many ways a great leader, but tapes emerged or have been released in more recent years that show that he swore like a sailor. Um, both Kennedy brothers were womanizers, especially JFK. How would they have fitted into this Me Too world? You know, there's certain things that, especially with the Kennedys, because they died young in tragic circumstances, they've kind of been martyrized. Had JFK lived, had he had a one-term or two-term presidency, and he just was another ex-president and grew to be an old man. Actually, I think his health problems would have been an issue anyway, but had he lived to be like George H.W. Bush or Jimmy Carter or Ronald Reagan, into his 90s, would there be a reassessment of his legacy and would there be the sort of adulation that he gets? So that's a rare example of political celebrity. Obama and Trump are probably two other examples of political celebrity. Um, Boris Johnson in this country as well. I would say with Boris Johnson, there's something of a celebrity about him that hasn't been seen by probably any other prime minister. Now, every prime minister, by virtue of their office, is going to be a famous person because they're the head of government, they're the most powerful person in the country. So, by virtue of their office, they're going to be famous, they're going to be in the public eye, along with senior ministers. But Theresa May, Gordon Brown, David Cameron, even Tony Blair and Margaret Thatcher, John Major, they were all normal politicians in the sense that they weren't celebrities. They weren't really public figures before they got into politics, at least not in the same way. Boris Johnson was, he was already a celebrity. I guess that's where some of the comparisons with Trump come in. Um, so Johnson is different in that sense. If Rishi Sunak or Liz Truss win, they're going to be a little bit more like the conventional politician, I think. Um, whether they're an effective prime minister or not. Um, so sometimes that celebrity thing gets into the realm of politics, not always, sometimes. So how do we differentiate between a famous person and a celebrity? Well, like I say, a high level politician is going to be famous, but they're not necessarily a celebrity. They're I mean, would we call Putin a celebrity? Would we call Xi Jinping a celebrity? Not necessarily. They're famous and they're powerful. and they're tyrants as far as I'm concerned, but they're not really celebrities in the conventional sense. Um, so really, it's more about the world of music, acting, sports. And I would say increasingly in the last 10 years, business as well. But you get, I mean, Elon Musk is definitely a celebrity. Jeff Bezos to a lesser extent, but certainly Elon Musk. Um, but again, is this about the world of business getting more into that realm, or is it just because Musk happens to be the wealthiest man in the world and one of the wealthiest men ever? I mean, he is super, super, super rich. Also, he's quite an eccentric character. I think all of those explain why he's so famous, all of those factors. But I don't like the cult of celebrity. What I mean by this is, I think fame can be good and bad. Obviously, there's the trappings of fame. We know, for example, in music, the 27 Club, the number of musicians who died at that age, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Amy Winehouse, Kurt Cobain, um, and the list goes on. So, Jim Morrison, so that's kind of a warning, I guess, about the celebrity lifestyle. Elvis died young at 42. Michael Jackson died at 50. Particularly in music, I would also say in the world of professional wrestling, there's enormous pressure, and I think a lot of it comes from touring. Actually, wrestling and music have that in common. Perhaps the reason we don't see quite so many actors with these problems is actors and actresses don't quite have to tour as much as musicians. Sure, they have to go to red carpet events and premieres of films, but if they're on set and they're shooting a film for 6 months, at least they're static, they're on one location. A musician is doing tours. So I would cautiously say that musicians are under slightly more pressure than actors in that sense, because they're touring more. Um, and with wrestlers, the world of professional wrestling, the number of people who've died young in that sport is shocking. But there's a lot of factors for that, I think. Um, so the pressure that comes from fame is enormous. But there's, I would say, fame for for good reasons, and then fame for fame's sake. I mean, if we look at this sort of phenomenon that we've seen over the last 10, 20 years, the Kardashians, celebrity contestants on Big Brother. I mean, so often this is just vacuous, and you struggle to think, what have these people actually achieved? Are they successful musicians? Are they successful business people? Or have they got their success because they were famous to begin with and they've just kind of utilized that? But here's the thing I really don't like about the cult of celebrity. And I'm not going to be totally negative here, so keep watching. But what I really don't like is the mindset of super fans. What I mean by that is you can have a particular musician or actor, um, and the fans, they almost worship the person to the point where they're not thinking objectively. Now, to give a recent example of this, the Depp Heard trial, I happen to think it was the right verdict. I watched that closely. I happen to think the jury reached the right conclusion. I think Amber Heard, her testimony was very flawed. It was contradictory, and she has a record. But I do say that some of the Depp fans were being a little bit, I don't know, blinded by their fandom. I do believe there was some of that going on. I still think the right verdict was reached, but Johnny Depp fans are as bad as any in the sense that they can kind of be lacking objectivity. So, for example, if you get a popular musician or actor, and he or she is asked tough questions by a journalist, you can be sure that the fans will pile onto that journalist and call him an idiot, and even worse, maybe even send death threats. It gets really unpleasant because how dare they question our god or goddess? I think it's very unhealthy. Um, I've seen this with Michael Jackson fans; they can get very hysterical. Um, but here's the thing: I'm not saying there's anything wrong with being a fan. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with admiring someone or looking up to someone. There's plenty of public figures I respect. In the world of acting, I have a lot of respect for Leonardo DiCaprio because I think the guy tries everything. I think he's such a versatile actor. I believe he's the best actor of his generation, or certainly in the top five. Um, that's inspiring. It's hard not to respect that. In the world of sports, there's certain fighters I respect. Manny Pacquiao, the Klitschko brothers. I have enormous respect for the Klitschko brothers. Um, Not only what they've done in the ring, but what they're now doing to defend their country. Just incredible. Um, in music, there's musicians I like, but I always stop myself from sort of adulating someone. So let's say, for the sake of argument, claims suddenly emerge about Leonardo DiCaprio. I'd be surprised, and I'd be certainly would get my attention. But I'm not going to blindly defend them and say, "Oh, the person saying this must be a liar." Or I think that people need to be very careful with fandom because no one can say, except in a very small number of cases, that they really, really know the person. You might know the public image of the person, but you cannot 100% say you know the person as an individual unless you've spent significant time with them. Because very often, and celebrities themselves say this, there's a public face and then there's a private person. Not that there is such a thing in this world of 24-hour news cycles and social media and paparazzi. Um, but I just don't like the attitude of super fans. I think they could be very aggressive and intolerant to any dissenting views, no matter how minute those dissenting views are. I just think it's unhealthy. Um, it's just an unhealthy way to look at things because they're lacking objectivity. When you idolize someone to the point where you won't listen to reason. So if a verifiable fact is stated, even if it's a provable fact, then they'll immediately jump on it. I can say, for example, Muhammad Ali, the great boxer, he believed in segregation. He opposed mixed marriages at a time when mixed race couples were facing very real discrimination. But I guarantee you, if I was to write that on a boxing forum, I'd be shouted down. I'd be absolutely lambasted. Because how dare you question the greatest? I could say, yeah, he is the greatest heavyweight ever. And all these things, that's all true. But there's this other side to him. And let's be honest about that. So the thing I really dislike, what makes me uncomfortable with super fandom, is it's just not objective. People cannot think objectively when they're worshipping someone. They can't. I think you can admire someone. I think you can look up to someone, but you need to draw a line with idolatry and worship. It's not healthy, and I don't do it with anyone. Anyone. Um, I really take the fundamental view that no human being is above criticism. You know, in parts of the world, as we know, where you have dictatorships, you cannot criticize the dictator or his government, and 99% of them are men. You can't, because if you did, you go to jail or you're killed. So it's very dangerous to do so. Now, I don't say it's the same thing with celebrities, but the way superfans act, it's kind of like this little microcosm of a this little bubble that they're in. That, how dare you think differently? It's I think it's very unhealthy. Now, of course, if a public figure is being unfairly criticized and condemned, then yeah, it's natural that people will want to defend them if there are false allegations or false claims. You know, I was looking at documentaries about the whole Savile scandal recently, the Jimmy Savile scandal. And it's important to remember in this country, Jimmy Savile was idolized for years. He was propped up by the establishment. But frankly, it wasn't just the BBC and it wasn't just the establishment, it was the public. The public was doing this. Liz Truss apparently had a tweet when he died, and she's now been ridiculed for not taking it down. But it wasn't just her. A lot of people at the time he died would say, "Oh yeah, that's sad news. What a great guy he was." Savile was idolized, and now we know the truth about him. And he's now one of the most vilified people in the country. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not for a second saying that other celebrities are comparable to Jimmy Savile, but that surely should be a warning about why it's unhealthy to worship someone to that extent and to enable someone to that extent. My point would be if you have people making claims about a famous person, they should be taken seriously. This doesn't mean that the famous person is guilty. And it can work the other way, for example, as we saw with Cliff Richard, which was a case of an innocent man being smeared. It can happen that way as well. But fans shouldn't act like their hero is above reproach. No human being, I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're a king, a queen, a president, a prime minister, a singer, a songwriter, an actor, a war hero. Nobody, nobody is above reproach. If people think criticism's unfair, fine, disprove it, challenge it. But don't say that a celebrity cannot be questioned. I just think that is a very vacuous and shallow way of thinking. So, yes, let's be inspired by successful people. Let's be inspired by motivational quotes. Let's be inspired by the way people carry themselves. You know, they do great things, they're successful. It's all great, but they're not perfect. Nobody's perfect. And I'm sure many celebrities would agree with me on that. Let me know your thoughts.